Darkly Dreaming Dexter Chapter 15, read by the Dark Passenger. Please like and subscribe. It was the static of his radio that gave him away. I was deeply involved in something I'd never tried before when I heard it. I was working on the torso with the knife point and could feel the first real tinglings of response down my spine and through my legs, and I didn't want to stop. But a radio, this was worse news than a mere guard arriving. If he called for backup or to have the road blocked, it was just possible that I might find a few of the things I had been doing a little difficult to explain. I looked down at Jaworski. He was nearly done now, and yet I was not happy with how things had gone. Far too much mess, and I had not really found what I was looking for. There had been a few moments where I felt on the brink of some wonderful thing, some amazing revelation to do with, what? The water flowing by outside the window. But it had not happened, whatever it had been. Now I was left with an unfinished, unclean, untidy, unsatisfying child rapist, and a security guard on his way to join us. I hate to rush the conclusion. It's such an important moment, and a real relief for both of us, the Dark Passenger and I. But what choice did I have? For a long moment, far too long, really, and I'm quite ashamed, I thought about killing the guard and going on. It would be easy, and I could continue to explore with a fresh start, but no, of course not, it wouldn't do. The guard was innocent as anyone can be, and still live in Miami. He'd probably done nothing worse than shoot at other drivers on the Palmetto Expressway a few times. Practically Snow White. No, I had to make a hasty retreat, and that was all there was to it. And if I had to leave the janitor not quite finished and me not quite satisfied, well, better luck next time. I stared down at the grubby little insect and felt myself fill with loathing. The thing was drooling snot and blood all together, the ugly wet slop burbling across his face. A trickle of awful red came from his mouth. In a quick fit of pique, I slashed across Jaworski's throat. I immediately regretted my rashness. A fountain of horrible blood came out, and the sight made it all seem even more regrettable, a messy mistake. Feeling unclean and unsatisfied, I sprinted for the stairwell. A cold and petulant grumbling from my Dark Passenger followed me. I turned out onto the second floor and slid sideways over to a glassless window. Below me, I could see the guard's golf cart parked, pointing in the direction of Old Cutlow, meaning, I hoped, that he had come from the other direction and had not seen my car. Standing beside the cart, a fat olive-skinned young man with black hair and a wispy black mustache was looking up at the building, luckily, looking at the other end at the moment. What had he heard? Was he merely on his regular route? I had to hope so. If he had actually heard something, if he stood outside and called for help, I was probably going to be caught. And as clever and glib-tongued as I was, I did not think I was good enough to talk my way out of this. The young guard touched a thumb to his mustache and stroked it as if to encourage fuller growth. He frowned, swept his gaze along the front of the building. I ducked back. When I peeked out again a moment later, I could just see the top of his head. He was coming in. I waited until I heard his feet in the stairwell. Then I was out the window, halfway between the first and second floors, hanging by my fingertips from the coarse cement of the windowsill, then dropping. I hit badly, one ankle twisting on a rock, one knuckle skinned, but in my very best rapid limp, I hurried into the shadows and scurried for my car. My heart was pounding when I finally slid into the driver's seat. I looked back and saw no sign of the guard. I started the engine, and with the lights still off, I drove as quickly and quietly as I could out onto Old Cutler Road, heading towards South Miami and taking the long way home along Dixie Highway. My pulse still pounded in my ears. What a stupid risk to take. I had never before done anything so impulsive, never before done anything at all without careful planning. That was the Harry way: be careful, be safe, be prepared, the Dark Scouts, and instead this. I could have been caught. I could have been seen. Stupid if I had not heard the young security guard. In time I might have had to kill him. Kill an innocent man with violence. I was quite sure Harry would disapprove, and it was so messy and unpleasant, too. Of course, I was still not Safed. Guard might easily have written down my license number if he had passed my car in his little golf cart. I had taken brainless, terrible risks, gone against all my careful procedures, gambled my entire carefully built life. And for what? A thrill kill, shame on me. And deep in the shaded corner of my mind the echo came, oh yes, shame, and the familiar chuckle. I took a deep breath and looked at my hand on the steering wheel, but it had been thrilling, hadn't it? It had been wildly exciting, full of life and new sensations and profound frustration. It had been something entirely new and interesting. And the odd sensation that it was all going somewhere, an important place that was new and yet familiar. I would really have to explore that a little better next time. Not that there was going to be a next time, of course. I would certainly never again do anything so foolish and impulsive. Never, but to have done it on some kind of fun, never mind. I would go home and take an exceptionally long shower, and by the time I was done time, it came into my mind unwanted and unasked. I had agreed to meet with Rita Attright about now, according to my dashboard clock. And for what dark purpose? I couldn't know what went on in the human female mind. Why did I even have to think about for what at a time like this, when all my nerve endings were standing up and yodeling with frustration? I did not care what Rita wanted to yell at me about. It would not really bother me, whatever sharp observations she had to make on my character defects, but it was irritating to be forced to spend time listening when I had other, far more important things to think about. Most particularly, I wanted to wonder what I should have done that I had not done with dear departed Jaworski. Up to the cruelly interrupted and unfinished climax, so many new things had happened that needed my very best mental efforts. I needed to reflect, to consider, and to understand where it had all been leading me, and how did it relate to that other artist out there, shadowing me and challenging me with his work. With all this to think about, why did I need Rita right now? But of course I would go. And of course, it would actually serve some humble purpose if I should need an alibi for my adventure with the little janitor. Why, detective, how could you possibly think that I? Besides, I was having a fight with my girlfriend at the time. A ex-girlfriend, actually, because there was absolutely no doubt in my mind that Rita merely wanted tow. Hat was the word we were all using lately. Vent, yes, Rita wanted me to come over so she could vent on me. I had certain major character flaws that she needed to point out with an accompanying burst of emotion, and my presence was necessary. Since this was the case, I took an extra minute to clean up. I circled back toward Coconut Grove and parked on the far side of the bridge over the waterway. A good deep channel ran underneath. I rolled a couple of large coral rocks out of the trees at the edge of the waterway, stuffed them into my tote bag, which was loaded with the plastic, gloves, and knife, and flung the thing into the center of the channel. I stopped once more at a small, dark park almost to Rita's house, and washed off carefully. I had to be neat and presentable. Getting yelled at by a furious woman should be treated as a semi-formal occasion. But imagine my surprise when I rang her doorbell a few minutes later. She did not fling wide the door and begin to hurl furniture and abuse at me. In fact, she opened the door very slowly and carefully, half hiding behind it, as if badly frightened of what might be waiting for her on the other side. And considering that it was me waiting, this showed rare common sense. Dexter, she said softly, shyly, sounding like she wasn't sure whether she wanted me to answer yes or no. I didn't think you were coming, and yet here I am, I said helpfully. She didn't answer for a much longer time than seemed right. Finally, she nudged the door slightly more open and said, "Would you come in, please?" And if her uncertain, limping tone of voice, unlike any I had ever heard her use before, was a surprise, imagine how astonished I was by her costume. I believe the thing was called a peignoir, or possibly it was a negligee, since it certainly was negligible as far as the amount of fabric used in its construction was concerned. Whatever the correct name, she was certainly wearing it, and as bizarre as the idea was, I believe the costume was aimed at me. "Please," she repeated. It was all a little much. I mean, really, what was I supposed to do here? I was bubbling over with unsatisfied experimentation on the janitor. There were still unhappy murmurings filtering through from the backseat. And a quick check of the situation at large revealed that I was being whipsawed between dear Deb and the dark artist. And now I was expected to do some sort of human thing here. Like, well, what? After all, she surely couldn't want, wasn't she mad at me? What was going on here? And why was it going on with me? "I sent the kids next door," Rita said. She bumped the door with her hip. I went in. I can think of a great many ways to describe what happened next, but none of them seem adequate. She went to the couch, I followed. She sat down, so did I. She looked uncomfortable and squeezed her left hand with her right. She seemed to be waiting for something, and since I was not quite sure what, I found myself thinking about my unfinished work with Jaworski. If only I'd had a little more time, the things I might have done. And as I thought of some of those things, I became aware that Rita had quietly started to cry. I stared at her for a moment, trying to suppress the images of a flayed and bloodless janitor. For the life of me, I could not understand why she was crying, but since I had practiced long and hard at imitating human beings, I knew that I was supposed to comfort her. I leaned toward her and put an arm across her shoulder. "Rita," I said, there, not really a line worthy of me, but it was wealth, thought of by many experts. And it was effective. Rita lunged forward and leaned her face into my chest. I tightened my arm around her, which brought my hand back into view. Less than an hour ago, that same hand had been holding a fillet knife over the little janitor. The thought made me dizzy. No wonder I had steadfastly refused to have dreams for most of my life. So stupid, such pointless, obvious symbols. Totally uncontrollable anxiety soup, hateful, blatant nonsense. And now I couldn't get back to sleep, thinking of the infantile images. If I had to dream, why couldn't it be more like me, interesting and different? I sat up and rubbed my throbbing temples. Terrible, tedious unconsciousness dripped away like a draining sinus, and I sat on the edge of the bed in bleary befuddlement. What was happening to me, and why couldn't it happen to someone else? This dream had felt different, and I wasn't sure what that difference was or what it meant. The last time I had been absolutely certain that another murder was about to happen, and even knew where. But this time I sighed and padded into the kitchen for a drink of water. Barbie's head went thack as I opened the refrigerator. I stood and watched, sipping a large glass of cold water. The bright blue eyes stared back at me, unblinking. Why had I had a dream? Was it just the strain of last evening's adventures playing back from my battered subconscious? I had never felt strain before. Actually, it had always been a release of strain. Of course, I had never come so close to disaster before, either. But why dream about it? Some of the images were too painfully obvious. Jaworski and Harry, and the unseen face of the man with the knife. Really now, why bother me with stuff from freshman psychology? Why bother me with a dream at all? I didn't need it. I needed Ristand instead. Here I was in the kitchen playing with a Barbie doll. I flipped the head again, thack thack. For that matter, what was Barbie all about? And how was I going to figure this out in time to rescue Deborah's career? How could I get around La Goethe when the poor thing was so taken with me? And by all that was holy, if anything actually was, why had Rita needed to do that to me? It seemed suddenly like a twisted soap opera, and it was far too much. I found some aspirin and leaned against the kitchen counter as I ate 3 of them. I didn't much care for the taste. I had never liked medicine of any kind, except in a utilitarian way. Especially since Harry had died.